Zsolt, what is your biggest concern for the euro area looking ahead to 2013?
The biggest concern is the economic outlook of Southern Europe. Because what we have seen so far is that at every update of the forecasts, their forecasts have been revised downward and downward and downward. Now, unemployment rate is 25% in Spain and in Greece. Even more worrisome, the youth unemployment rate is over 50%. So every second young people who would like to work cannot work. Now, this is certainly a major issue, and if this deterioration would continue, then there is a risk, at least in Greece, that it could culminate in the collapse of the government, of the Greek government. And if the current Greek government, which is mostly composed of parties in the political center, would collapse, and a far left government or a far right government would come to power, then most likely the cooperation between Greece and the European partners would be much weaker or much difficult, or even the cooperation could collapse, which would culminate in an exit of Greece from the euro area, which would be really devastating for Greece, but also it would be extremely difficult to safeguard other weaker countries in Southern Europe. So there should be a major priority for European lenders to somehow try to boost economic growth in Southern Europe, because that's the major risk for the integrity of the euro area.
Numerous forecasts see severe recession continuing in 2013. So how will poor growth affect or offset structural reforms in Greece or elsewhere?
Structural reforms take a long time to have an effect. And even in the short term, they may lead to further problems. For example, if labor regulations are reformed and firing people being made easier by the reforms, then in the short term unemployment would even increase. So structural reforms typically have a cost in the short term, and their benefits arise only in the medium and long term. Now, concerning the euro area aggregate, the major question is indeed how and when private demand would return. Now, in Southern Europe, there are two offsetting issues. One is that the uncertainty about euro area membership and the very strong fiscal consolidation strongly depress demand. But on the other hand, the European central bank's outright monetary transactions, so this new measure that was announced in early September, have already led to a reduction in the non-financial corporate spreads that these countries, these corporations have to pay. So this will help a little bit. Also, the ongoing negotiations with the banking union may help to limit the ongoing fragmentation of the financial markets inside the euro area. So this could help. So basically, these different forces will determine whether the euro would grow next year or not.
And how quickly do you think the Eurozone can finalize its plans for a banking union next year?
Now, what is clear is that all legs of the banking union should be put together. So in addition to the single supervisor, there should also be a single resolution authority and also a deposit insurance scheme for the whole euro area. But it's also clear that this is an extremely complex process, and there are many political constraints, and the political reality does not allow to do everything in once. So what I expect is that the project will continue. Most likely sometime next year, the single supervisor will come into power. Now it's a question whether it will be able to supervise all banks, at least even in the long term, or there should be a different system, for example, for the German Landesbanks and other cooperative banks, which have a very different business model. But most likely the single supervisor will start, firstly with the major pan-European banking groups. Its relation to resolution, unfortunately in the short term, there will be no Eurozone-wide resolution capacity. The temporary solution would be using the ESM, the European Stability Mechanism, to stabilize those banks which have been checked by the single supervisor, because after that, if problems come to these banks, then the ESM will be able to recapitalize them. This is certainly a temporary solution. We can just hope that in the medium term they will move toward indeed a full-fledged banking resolution authority, which is, by the way, also included in the European Commission's blueprint, which they published last week.